The feminist thinker that I decided to look at for this project was Naomi Weinstein. She is a feminist psychologist who I really did not know about before starting this project, but her life is just so intriguing, and I'm excited to share that with you. I'm really glad that I found her because I learned a lot from her. So, to start, she was born in New York to two Jewish activists. Her mom was really involved in women's activism, which inspired her to go against gender norms, which is why she chose to go into science instead of something that would be more suitable for women at the time. Um, so she attended Wellesley College for her undergraduate, and if you don't know about Wellesley, it is a really famous all-girls college in Massachusetts, but it's kind of around the area of Harvard, which is where she did her graduate program starting in 1961, um, where she finally got to work with men who believed that she didn't belong there and that women of that age should be wives and homemakers, not still receiving an education, which she was explicitly told by multiple men that she was in the program with. But she graduated at the top of her class and graduated in about 2.5 years when the typical graduate program now takes about 6 years, and got her PhD. But it wasn't that easy because those men believed that she was not supposed to be in the graduate program and denied her access to the equipment from the department so that she couldn't work on her dissertation unless she went to Yale, which actually worked out in her favor because she ended up meeting her husband and one of her close friends in New Haven. But it really probably set her back. She could have finished her program earlier if she didn't have to go about 120 miles just to use lab equipment. But she studied in the field of neuroscience. Today, we really would put her study into cognitive psychology. But after graduating, she wanted to work at the University of Chicago, but since her husband worked there, they wouldn't hire her because of nepotism reasons. So she accepted a position at Loyola University in Chicago where she could teach and conduct research, which typically women didn't do. They didn't teach. But she studied how the brain is a part of perception, which is a really big part of cognitive psychology today. And while in Chicago, she published probably her most notable work, and it's heavily cited. It's called The Psychology Constructs the Female. This article is criticizing very famous psychologists like Erik Erikson, who is one of the most influential developmental psychologists. His findings are still being taught today. I was learning about him in my developmental psychology class and my introduction to psychology. But she talks about how sexist he was and how he believed that woman doesn't have her own identity until she finds the man that she's going to marry. Just continues to talk about how psychology doesn't really take into account women. And I think this quote sums up her argument for the paper. It says psychology has nothing to say about what women are really like, what they need, and what they want, especially because psychology does not know, which is really drawing to the fact that psychology doesn't have the evidence for women in their studies and stuff like that. It's just really theories. While also in Chicago, she founded the Chicago Women's Liberation Union. It's really just a strong group of women across Chicago who fought for the advancement of women's rights and LGBTQ rights. And with that, they established the Chicago Women's Liberation Rock Band, who wanted to make rock and roll music about the liberation of women and not the subjugation, because they really liked the whole counterculture part of it, but they didn't like all the sexism that was in rock and roll. Overall, she brought to light how little psychologists incorporate the lives of women into their work, which I think is really important because psychology was a big growing part of science back then, and I mean still is. And she also showed that it's sometimes needed to challenge the ideas of who may be above you, because no one else will. And sometimes you need to be the loud person that brings it up. She was also heavily involved in women's activism, and I think to sum her up, there's this quote that says, "Let us return to an activist challenging badass feminist psychology." And I really think that she carried that through with her until she passed in 2015. So thank you.